2025, the UNESCO International Scientific Committee published a review of the 1974 publication General History of Africa. This review was crafted as an alternative to the Eurocentric views of world history.
African thought was dismissed by Western scholars like Hegel, who denied Africa any significant religion or moral system, branding it as primitive and incapable of sophisticated thought.
Today, the MFA acknowledges that archaeologists, including Reisner, looked at Nubia with racial prejudice.
When he saw the amazing material that came out of these sites, he concluded at Kerma, for example, that this material was too good to have been made by black Africans. It must be Egyptian.
Many of the early archaeologists came to the study of ancient Egypt and ancient Nubia from the perspective of Semitic languages or the study of the Hebrew Bible. And it was very important to them to bring Egypt specifically into the sphere of biblical studies. And so they had to carve Egypt away from Africa to bring it into that sphere. And the way that they did that was they used race. So these early archaeologists effectively made ancient Egypt white in the sense that they made it part of a dominant Western culture, and ancient Nubia was separated from that. It was black. And this was how they took Egypt out of Africa and put it into this Semitic sphere, this biblical sphere.
And so the Hamitic hypothesis took on a new scientific spin and started being proliferated in a number of disciplines like anthropology, Egyptology, ancient history, et cetera, to now explain how civilization got to Africa in the first place. And so any kind of civilization or semblance of civilization was now the birthright or the work of pastoral Hamites from Europe, or at least in some cases from the Middle East, but not African. They brought civilization to Egypt and therefore disseminated this in the rest of Africa.
And I think it was only really that after that experience that I thought, am I in some kind of bubble here or something? You know, and I started to actually look into the sort of background, really, the sort of, which we're starting to talk about a little bit more in terms of colonial approaches. But still not directly the racism that Egyptology is founded upon. And at that point, it was almost like a sort of light bulb moment. I thought, well, why is this still the case when we, are we still stuck, 100 years sort of previously in this kind of racist ideology? Why is nobody challenging this? Because other disciplines had. So anthropology had looked very hard at itself in terms of looking at its colonial kind of past. It just seemed that Egyptology was kind of almost stuck there and it didn't really want to talk about it. So for me, it always was African. It was a bit of a shock to me when I actually started looking a bit deeper into this and then started having conversations with people and seeing how they responded to that.
Ta Seti, the land of the bow, the first kingdom on earth. Now, I know what you're thinking. I've never heard of this place. And that's exactly the problem, because the silence around Ta Seti isn't an accident.
Ta Seti is the place name. The English translation is Nubia Ta Seti, which is the first nome of Upper Egypt.
In the 1970s, archaeologist Bruce Williams from the University of Chicago made a discovery in the deserts of Nubia that shook Egyptology to its core. He found royal tombs, and inside, a ceramic incense burner decorated with a king wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt, the same crown the pharaohs wore, except this artifact was 200 years older than the first recognized pharaoh. 200 years. Think about that. A fully formed government, a royal dynasty, existing before the thing that was supposed to be first. When Williams published his findings, the academic world exploded. Some celebrated. Others tried to bury it. because accepting Ta Seti as the first kingdom meant admitting something uncomfortable, that black African civilizations were at the forefront of human development.
This discovery challenges the traditional view that the symbolisms of Egyptian pharaohs originated within Egypt itself. It suggests that early Egyptian rulers may have adopted these symbols from Nubian traditions rather than the other way around.
This is the earliest depiction of that crown. It proves that the first pharaohs were Nubians who spread northward, as taught in the Egyptian Edfu texts. In the heart of Upper Egypt, heartland of the pharaohs, lies the Temple of Edfu, an ancient marvel that has seen the rise and fall of empires. The temple's history dates back to the Old Kingdom period, and it has undergone multiple transformations since then. However, what makes it truly unique are the Edfu texts, a collection of inscriptions that hold the secrets to the origins of Kemet, the ancient civilization that once flourished in the Nile Valley, today called Ancient Egypt. The Edfu texts were written during the Ptolemaic period, but their content is far older. They contain fragments of real history, woven together in a narrative that speaks of Ra-Harmachis, king of Ta Seti, true name of Nubia, who conquered Egypt and established himself as king at Edfu. From there, he dispatched his son Horus and the blacksmiths to conquer the delta and unify the whole territory under their rule. Together they founded the civilization of Kemet. This story is a testament to the origins of ancient Egypt, and it reveals a truth that modern scholars often overlook.
The first is that the ancient Nile Valley cultures are indisputably African cultures.
The chair of scientific committee, Augustine Hall, stated that ancient Egypt had African and Eurasian populations.
North Africa, they're not African. I'm sorry.
And you can't have it both ways. This is one of the core points of Out of Africa, that all Out of Africa groups are actually more similar than other groups in Africa.
Because even though they live in Africa, most of their DNA is tied to the Middle East.
But I really don't think it can be stressed enough that just because it is in Africa, it does not mean that it's more closely related to other African groups.
With the updated review section stating that the recent data has repositioned Upper Egypt as the origin for the political unifying movement and marked by the political breakthrough of kingdoms of the south towards the north, integrating cultural traits into the process,
revealing the African rootedness of pre-dynastic and early dynastic Egyptian culture.
Now we can look at Egypt and say the ancient Egyptians are an African civilization.
Evidence which identified close affinities between Upper Egyptian populations and sub-Saharan groups. The Ta Seti study also includes mummies from Ta Seti, a region in Nubia, modern-day Sudan, and southern Egypt, and found that southern Egyptians were more closely related to Nubians and other northeastern African groups.
Here, the MFA distances itself from the racist narrative of its forebears. Nubia no longer lives in the shadow of Egypt, but as an equal civilization that rose, conquered, and created on its own terms.
Long before the famed English longbowmen rose to dominate the battlefields of the Middle Ages, there came another feared group of archers whose reign would last thousands of years. They hailed from the land of the bow, far beyond the southern borders of Egypt. Yet, despite the remoteness of their homeland, these warriors were known far and wide as marksmen without peer, and employed as prized mercenaries by many armies of the past. These were the Nubian archers, longbowmen of Africa.
These people, at every point, had a sense of participation in the world of their times. They were not victims. They were not bystanders. They had interest, and they acted to realize those interests.
Let us also drop these crazy ideas that we must all be Arabs. Even God will not accept this.
The identity of the Ta Seti people has not yet been definitively established. From what is known today, the Ta Seti are believed to have spoken a Nilo-Saharan language. The Nilo-Saharans from Sudan.
Sudan is the largest country in Africa and roughly 1/4 the size of the United States.
The haplogroup A frequencies of the Dinka is 62%.
We're gathered here to celebrate the launch of our new book on the Dinka, the legendary cattle keepers of Sudan.
As early as 1948, renowned Egyptologist Henry Frankfurt argued that rather than looking to Near Eastern institutions and cultures to understand ancient Egypt, one should look to other African cultures that potentially share common roots in a regional cultural complex that included cattle pastoralism.
Most researchers thought the first domesticated cattle in Africa arrived from the Near East, perhaps as early as 7,800 years ago. But in the 1980s, a few archaeologists began to argue that the inhabitants of northeastern Africa had domesticated cattle independently some 10,000 years ago.
However, there are some that suggest there may have been a third domestication event on the African continent. Either way, Sangha cattle is the collective name given to the indigenous cattle of sub-Saharan Africa, all of which have played an important role in local culture for many thousands of years. Pastoralism is defined as the practice of herding as the primary economic activity of a society.
Bos Taurus africanus. This cattle originated in East Africa, probably the western shore of Lake Victoria, and have spread down the River Nile northwards, with depictions on ancient Egypt murals. So the paintings in the ancient Egypt tombs, you'd see Sangha cattle.
In the satirical letter of Hori, we see Wenjut used to say a particular people group, "I will be buried with among my group in the mountain of the Holy Land of Abydos." It is clear to see that people and cattle were metaphorically symbolic of one another. In the case of Kemet, we should understand the black people of the land to be metaphorically equated to the divine black herd, Kemet. The king of this divine herd is often called the Bull of Bulls, and he is adorned with a symbolic bull's tail which encapsulates this divine bovine metaphor.
The pastoral lifestyle that characterized the later part of this period survives in modern southern Nilotic groups like the Dinka.
Egyptian scholar Gamal Mokhtar stated, the inventory of hieroglyphic symbols is entirely based on melodic fauna and flora, thus proving that the script is of purely African origin.
And South Sudan is the only majority Nilotic country in the world. Ancestral tribal territories are actually found in South Sudan, Ethiopia, Uganda, Kenya, DRC, Burundi, Sudan, and Tanzania, Africa. Seeing them with their long limbs, quite distinct facial features, and jet black hairless skin, these people are the least known people among Westerners.
So I actually would argue that we don't call it an Afro-Asiatic culture, but we actually call it a Nilotic culture.
Sir Wallace Budge also said, the ancient Egyptian language can't be Semitic in origin because it contains too many words that express fundamental relationships, feelings, and beliefs that are peculiarly African and foreign to Semitic peoples. It could only have been invented by the oldest Africans from the Nile Valley, who, he added, came from the Great Lakes region.
Say, Juju, what'd you say?
It said located upstream of the first cataract of the Nile, today northern Sudan and Upper Egypt, people lived in ancient Nubia from at least 300,000 BC.
So this is very important, Sudan and Upper Egypt.
On the latitude more or less of Kenya, and that area which comprises Kenya, Ethiopia, and Tanzania.
With the inclusion of modern and ancient genomes combined with their method, the researchers were able to make a prediction on where our common ancestors lived. The inferred geographic region from their oldest samples suggested that they originated in Sudan.
I believe it's the 25th dynasty, was the quote-unquote Black Pharaohs. But they're not the only Black pharaohs in Egyptian history, and they're also not the only Black people in Egypt. The ties are deep. Again, and we have the settling of a trade outpost, Naucratis, in the Nile Delta, which is a pan-Hellenic trading outpost. When they actually finally start interacting with the Egyptians are ruled by the Nubians.
One of the goals of the exhibition, Fried says, is not only to highlight the treasures, but also to set the record straight on Nubia's place in history.
You see a progression of the development of the different styles that we identify as Nubian. In some cases, they're very similar to Egyptian. They take what they want and mold it in their own way.
The people of Tasseti, also known as ancient Nubia, are considered the ancestors of the ancient Egyptians.
The originals built the earth. Why must there be aggression to learn a basic lesson? Quite majestic, stern within reality. A juggernaut when you tamper with mentality. Or with a crown, extension and dimension of a brain cell. Bringing hell to the sellouts.
This means the roots of pharaonic civilization, and therefore the roots of Greek and Roman and finally European civilization in general, lie in the north of the Sudan.
Yo, Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, step off.
And ancient Greeks referred to hieroglyphics as Ethiopian writings, which means black people's writings.
And this is not to be confused with the Ethiopia of today. That Ethiopia became Aksum and Abyssinia. Ethiopia is the name that the Greeks used to talk about this land of Nubia. So it basically meant land of the people that are sunburned or kissed by the sun or burnt faces.
But also the people that we refer to now as either Nubians or Cushites. Those were also called Ethiopians by our Greek sources, and they were in Egypt.
You know, Herodotus went to Egypt in the 5th century and said that Egypt was more religious than any place on earth.
Here inside the temple, where only the most pious were allowed, Taharqa is shown in deference to Egypt's most powerful god. And outside on the mountain, he exhibits his devotion on a truly monumental scale by embellishing the very top of its pinnacle. 180 metres tall and 11 metres from the cliff face, it seems completely inaccessible. But Taharqa pulled off an incredible technical achievement. He built a crane arm and elaborate scaffolding in order to make his own permanent mark on the mountain.
What he did was he made an inscription for himself commemorating his victories east and west, and then underneath his men set a small statue of the king, and they covered the inscription with gold. Today you can hardly see it, but in those days it would have been the most conspicuous feature of the mountain.
I mean, that's meant to be seen by the gods.
Seen by the gods.
Of course, no mortal eye could read this from the ground, but that wasn't the point. This was a message to the gods carved on a monument built to impress. Completely covered in gold, it reflected the sun's rays, and it acted like a giant billboard as it telegraphed Taharqa's message for miles around. And this again harked back to Egypt's past, when previous pharaohs had placed gilded capstones on their pyramids and obelisks to harness the potent powers of the sun. Just to the east of Jebel Barkal lies the necropolis of Nuri, where the Kushite king's transformation into Egyptian pharaohs was finally completed. For the dynasty who'd invaded Egypt were now copying Egypt's ultimate symbol. And for the first time in over 1,000 years, the kings who ruled Egypt were buried in pyramids.
When the kings made their capital at Memphis, they were living right across the river from the Great Pyramids. Taharqa spent most of his life there and was familiar with the Great Pyramids. And so when he died, he needed a pyramid of commensurate scale. And this, he sort of established this new type, and it was followed by all of his successors.
The Kushites eventually built more pyramids here in their Nubian homeland than the Egyptians had built in Egypt. And just as at Giza, Taharqa's pyramid is precisely aligned to its environment. For on the exact day when the Nile flood begins to recede, the sun sets just like this, directly behind the Jebel Barkal pinnacle. Yet only on this specific day, and only when viewed from the top of Taharqa's pyramid. That is totally impressive. Not just a skill, a feat of engineering, but such devotion to the gods.
Gods, observing nature.
Yeah.
I mean, it would take a huge amount of observation to get the position just right, to get the day just right.
Surrounded by these pyramids, the images of Amun and Mut and their monumental temples, it's easy to forget that the Kushites were actually a foreign power who'd taken Egypt by force. Yet it's almost as if Egypt was taunting its invaders. While you may try and dominate our land, our culture will ultimately dominate you.
They also were responsible for introducing into world history the first recorded Renaissance. They rebuilt temples, monuments. They rewrote ancient scripts and gave voice to their ancestors, such that Egypt experienced its last great walk in the sun. When the 25th dynasty fell, Kemet was never again ruled by indigenous African people.
You noticed that people act like Sudan didn't exist.
These Africans from Kush, or modern-day Sudan, were responsible for restoring the land of their ancestors. Those were their words.
Then a king will come from the south, a many that's justified by name. He will make his name for eternity. Thy evil-minded, the treason plotters, they suppress their speech in fear of him. Asiatics will fall to his sword, Libyans will fall to his flame, rebel to his wrath, traitors to his might. One will build the walls of the ruler to bar Asiatics from entering Egypt. Then order will return to its seat, while chaos is driven away. Rejoice, he who may behold, he who may attend the king, and he who is wise will liberate from me, when he sees fulfilled what I have spoken.
Egypt seems to be not even just for what we're talking about in the Judeo-Christian concept, but like writers like Diodorus of Sicily really wants people to know Egypt is a special place for religious purposes. The ideas of religion are coming out of Egypt all over the place. What do you think do you think this is kind of the same thing happening with these other religions in the Levant, maybe?
I think everywhere, every place has religion. Everywhere where there's people, there's going to be some spirituality first. Anywhere where there's quote unquote civilized people, there's going to be religion, something that's institutionalized.
So my dad was saying, we were watching a documentary not very long ago about the civilization of the Kushites, and he got out his History of the Bible book because he remembered the name Taharqa, and saw that Taharqa was an Ethiopian king, and he said, well, this doesn't make any sense, does it? Because these monuments of Taharqa are in Sudan. Ethiopia is a different place. And so I thought, having tried to explain this to Dad, it would be a useful thing maybe to do here. So I hope that's clear. I hope. It's also the case that the word Cush, which occurs in the Hebrew Bible, becomes in the Greek form Ethiopia. So again, and there are kings of Cush, identifiable kings of Cush, particularly Taharqa of the 25th dynasty, in the Bible. They are called there Ethiopian. And again, Ethiopia in these ancient texts appears to refer to everything south of Aswan. In the mind of Herodotus, for example, it was the extent of the known world to the south. So if you're exploring the known world, the known Mediterranean world as he was, you'd go through Egypt, and then at a certain point you cross into a different place, and that place is Ethiopia. Beyond this, there was no knowledge of anything. The reason that this word comes to be the name of a country in a different place seems to have been that it was used by the people of the kingdom of Aksum, which is in the northernmost part of the modern country of Ethiopia. And the increase in power of the kingdom of Aksum is probably one of the reasons for the collapse of the kingdom of Kush. These people came to identify themselves as Ethiopians. And it's for that reason that the modern territory a part of which is Axum, came to have this modern name.
With Kush in terminal decline, the Axumites would launch a full-scale invasion in around 350 AD, resulting in the final collapse of the ancient kingdom. The Nubian peoples would weather this calamity and consolidate into 3 smaller successor states in Kush's former territory: Nobatia, Makuria, and Alodia. For a time, the fragmented Nubian states would continue to cling on to the bygone days of Kushite glory. Throughout the 5th century, the kings of Nobatia continued to adorn themselves in the royal regalia of their Meroite ancestors and worship their Egyptianized pantheon. However, a new religion would penetrate into the ancient Nubian desert and forever change the cultural fabric of the land. It is here that the Christian faith is finally introduced to Nubia. By the 4th century AD, Christianity had become the cultural backbone of the Roman Empire. In time, there emerged 5 main ecclesiastical centers of Christianity within its borders: Rome, Constantinople, Jerusalem, Antioch, and Alexandria. Egypt became Christian through the Alexandrian Church. By the early 6th century, the western half of the empire had fallen, but the Greek-speaking Byzantine half endured and retained control of the wealthy region, becoming the greatest political and cultural powerhouse in the Mediterranean. Nubia had always been malleable to adopting the religions that came out of Egypt. Now, in order to strengthen their economic ties to the powerhouse that was Justinian's Roman Empire, they considered doing so again. The Romans in Alexandria sent their priests southwards. The Christianization of the Nubians was complete by 580, and the Kushite temples were converted into churches. The most striking evidence of social change during this era can be observed in the shift in burial rites. Whereas before, Kushite rulers were buried in ornate royal tombs amidst piles of wealth, no such glamour has been found for the monarchs of the Christian era. The deity above now meant more than any worldly king. For roughly a century, the kingdoms of Christian Nubia enjoyed a period of prosperity. Wealth from Eastern Rome flowed down the Nile into their lands, and with it, cultural influence. Greek emerged as the dominant language among the Nubian aristocracy and clergy. It was around this time that the kingdom of Makuria absorbed Nobatia, becoming the predominant power in the region.
Sudan is literally attached to Egypt, but people attach Egypt to Arabia and Ethiopia, who share no border with that country.
And Ethiopia, with its 1st century AD capital at Aksum.
The word comes from Arabic, Bilad al-Sudan, the land of black people.
The Sudanid phenotype refers to the population that is not exclusive to Sudanese people but is widespread, native to the savanna regions of North Equatorial Africa. Their skulls are long and high, with a very wide and relatively low-rooted nose, bulging lips and small chin, a steep forehead and a large face, kinky hair, long legs, and a muscular body, reminding you of someone called Michael Jordan. Compared to the Bantuids of the southern savannas, Sudanese have more pronounced features, higher skulls, and longer legs. These traits represent an adaptation to the humid savanna climates. And the most typical variety of the Sudanese is the Sudanid proper, which is found in West Africa. In East Africa, particularly in Kordofan, a smaller East Sudanid type can be found. There are variations within the Sudanid group as well. The Bobo type in Burkina Faso is characterized by shorter skulls, while the Senegalese type exhibits more glacial features and darker skin. The Equatorial Sudanese in Central Africa shows a stronger influence from the Congolese phenotype, similar to the several other varieties such as the Casamense type. Sudanese were brought to other continents through slavery, particularly to the Americas, where they continue to constitute an important element in the population. In recent times, migration have brought Sudanese to Europe and parts of Asia. And it's important to note that the Sudanese phenotype is not limited to individuals from Sudan, but rather describes a broader population found across the savanna regions of North Equatorial Africa.
But we do have proof to why the indigenous Nile Valley Africans called themselves black.
Black is a color while blackness state of a mind state. But how many of you fake? Today, Brother J can find a better way, so be it. it down and make it stay. I serve a purpose. Yet I'm not the G.I. Joe, I am the brother. Yo, I can never swear close, so just kiss me a step to the mic and stage area as I drop the science that breaks the clock barrier. Words of old make me more than a beginner. The key opens knowledge in place and antenna. American a man, African a brother. Don't forget the land, cause the birth is from the mother. A vibe is in place, obtained and discovered. Tune in your audio and hear the words of brother.
But I was just thinking of the word join, and it's not, it was almost like I found my family. Right. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like I wasn't joining anything. It's just like I found my family.
Edmund Barry Gaither also says the exhibition feels like a family reunion.
It is, at a personal level, a little bit like visiting how you imagine your great-great-great-great-great-grandfathers and mothers. At another level, it's to enter a story of another of the great adventures in the human enterprise of civilization.
It felt right. And the difference between that and other groups or movements at the time was that, you know, Black Watch spoke about Egyptology. You know what I mean? It spoke about, you know, we come from kings and queens with royalty. I mean, that was new for me. You know what I mean? I didn't really.
Or whatever. I mean, Ramses III is bearing E1B1A Y chromosome lineage, which is an old African lineage in the E. That doesn't mean wherever that lineage originated in Africa, doesn't mean that his daddy came from there or his granddaddy came from there. That stuff was all mixed up in the Sahara and the Nile Valley.
And you know, at the age of 9, I went to Egypt. My mom took me to Egypt. My mom took me to Cairo. So, you know, I saw the pyramids, you feel me? Like I went to the tombs and I saw all that, but I just.
So when you hear them saying things,
you
and
feel
talking,
me? I'm just like, all is together.
Gotcha.
All is together. And I was just like, it almost felt very synchronistic. You know what I mean? Like this, I'm on purpose. I'm supposed to be here. This is where I'm supposed to be. And I know that that was a blessing for me to come into the industry like that. Because in many ways I was protected. By the red, the black, and the green, for real. But I was protected, though. You know what I mean? I was really protected. And
what an exhibition like this does is it provides well-defined historical brick in a wall that is itself much bigger.
Louis Vuitton, stole it from Africa. Versace, stole it from Africa. The Washington Monument, stole it from Africa. They even stole some of us from Africa. All of y'all wealth, stole it from Africa. Statue of Liberty, stole it from Africa. Jesus, stole it from Africa. Everything we made, niggas is jacket. American Eagle, stole it from Africa. Queen Elizabeth Gold, stole it from Africa. Lincoln statue, stole it from Africa. It was made in China, but stolen from Africa. The medical symbol, stole it from Africa. Jesus' story, stole it from Africa. The cross, stole it from Africa. The light bulb, stolen from Africa. The Pope even know that it started with Africa. It starts with an Anthony Joseph or Tabitha. Oscar Award, stole it from Africa. Mount Rushmore, stole it from Africa. I even think that it used to be Africans. Medusa, she was also an African.
This information is hidden because it proves that Black Africans created Egypt.